starting these shows when I'm laughing. Well, welcome to Chronicles of EMS Seat at the Table. I'm your host, Justin Shore, American Paramedic.
I'm Dave Lippin. I'm commander of a local DMAT here in the San Francisco area.
Welcome.
Andy Schwartzel, RN on our DMAT team with Dave, A6.
I'm Jim Crabtree, RN, Disaster Training Specialist from Los Angeles County.
I'm Lisa Laris. I'm an EMT on California 1, which is down in Orange County, and I'm also a disaster manager.
And also at the table, we have, of course, in Chronicles of EMS style, we're live streaming to the interwebs machine. There's a worldwide audience listening. If they have any questions that come up, I'll make sure to ask those. Most importantly, for the audience, we're talking about disaster medicine today, DMAT. I'm guessing the first two words are disaster medicine or medical.
Medical.
What are the other two words?
Assistance team.
So what is that?
Well, actually, I'd like to start off with one thing that the audience should be clarified with, because in disasters, this is a huge problem. Since the audience of this show is responders, and a lot of people are interested in disasters, Haiti earthquake, Katrina or something, I want to rush in there and help. I would like everybody who watches this show to say there is no reason you should not go in unless you're going in with an organization. For freelancers to rush into a disaster scene brings more victims. It makes the problem harder. So as we talk here and representatives of teams and give information on how to respond, I want to make it really clear to folks, and I think all my folks here would agree with me, single rescuers who just rush in to help are not helping anybody. You have to be part of the system. And
Yes.
that is so important.
Adding yourself to the incident, you're not adding yourself as a
Yes.
rescuer.
Oh,
Right.
You're
yes.
becoming
You
a
become
liability.
part of
Yeah.
And not just a liability in the general two definitions of liability. You're not only just a problem, but you're more of a hindrance.
That's right.
It's
When you
not
show
like-
up, you will. When people show up, they want food, they want water. Well, they didn't bring enough for a week for themselves. You have to check in. Disaster management. Anybody who responds, one of the basic aspects of responding is to get training in the incident command system. And the reason you get the incident command system, and the classes can be quite boring sometimes, is so that you understand when you arrive on scene who to check in with. That there is a check-in point, that you let people know that you're there. There was a situation in World Trade Center where they were clearing through the rubble not long after the collapse, and they found 4 firefighters. Oh my gosh, they're still alive, they cleared the rubble. 4 firefighters from like Virginia or West Virginia who had driven up to New York, went to the scene, didn't tell anybody they were there, working around the collapse. They got partially covered with rubble, and it's like nobody knew they were there. That stuff absolutely, if there's one thing that comes out of this, must stop.
And I think what Jim is saying is, even on a team like ours, even though it's a medical team, there's a lot of people on the team that support it in terms of logistics, communications,
Right.
transport. We call it a medical team, but we have people on the team with various capabilities, not
Even
just
security,
physicians,
police officers
nurses,
that do the force protection.
yeah, but people can drive a truck.
In fact, the medicine takes up a really small part of it.
I think
The
it's,
whole thing.
I mean, my first thought is that response is sort of ingrained into it, is beaten into us. Go and help, and that's what we're trained to do as EMTs, medics, and nurses. But there's a line that you cross when you go from sort of a local disasters. That's not really quite the right word, but something that's very temporary, may last for a few hours or a day, but then you get to go home at night.
Right.
There's a line you cross between there and something where you're
But
really out there.
yes, the question, what is a DMAT?
And real quick, Paramedic 0750 in our chat room asked a very important question, and I will get to your question in a little while. We're going to skip ahead and come back to this topic of not self-dispatching. Please do not go into an emergency situation if you have not been specifically requested.
Right.
Exactly.
They're
Absolutely.
asking, what should I do when I am requested? We'll get to that.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
different.
But
It's a little different.
the DMAT team, it's more than just medicine. I'm hearing there's security, there's people with different specialties.
Security, there's communications experts. We have people that are trained in amateur radio. They set up the repeaters so we could talk to each other, or talk to different DMAT teams, maybe even talk to fire or law or what have you. So they're the ones who
The,
take care of
the
that.
DMAT teams were part of the National Disaster Medical System. under the auspices of Health and Human Services.
Right.
I don't think people realize that although we're essentially intermittent federal employees, we train as volunteers, we participate, but in a disaster like the World Trade Center, Katrina, for example, we are federalized, or we're activated and become intermittent federal employees. And the DMAT teams are, I don't think a lot of people know, we're really one of the uniform branches of the federal government. So we are essentially like National Guard or someone
Army
else.
Reserve or something.
Or Army Reserve. We can be called up and utilized in those times. But until then, most of us are volunteers giving our time, for training.
In a short history of how this happened, a disaster happens, you need folks to come in and help. And at one time it was big-hearted people who would just rush in. They made a mess of things. So the federal government, other government says, let's take some people who want to help, give them some sort of a training, give them some equipment, and then tools. And now when they come in, they are better able, better prepared, they fit better with the system. And it's gone through a lot of reinventions and iterations and whatnot, going from Health and Human Services and FEMA and back again. But the main concept is these are groups of people who want to help in disasters, who join this team, and the DMAT team is just one of many concepts that are out there, so that you get the training and then you can be dispatched when a disaster happens. And again, it's important to realize disasters are local. So nobody rushes in without an invitation. The local people say, we're swamped, we're overwhelmed, send help, and then they can send help, a request to Team 1, Team 2, Team 3, go in. Team 4, you're staying home for whatever reason. Team 7, you are going in for whatever reason. And then they show up with their tools and equipment. And so that's the big concept of a DMAT team, is that they're folks that have this pre-training that can go in and make a difference.
Now, in a lot of the media and a lot of the education, you can say the term USAR. And immediately people have seen USAR teams stand by to deploy, the logistics that goes behind it. DMAT team we don't hear much about. And now it's sounding like it's a very, USAR is specialized in one and DMAT is specialized in another. What is that team going to do when they are supported and they arrive in an emergency situation, let's say at a Katrina or at a Haiti incident? What is that DMAT team's primary responsibility?
I think that to continue on the theme that Jim was saying, that what we do is whatever the locals want us to do, and there's a wide range of things that we're trained to do and we're capable of doing. Everything from the most extreme thing that we train for is to set up a field hospital, completely self-contained field hospital that doesn't rely on local resources at all. But we can also provide ER decompression. We can go into an ER, set up,
Augment their staff.
right, set up outside up front of for an emergency room. We can send out mobile units to work at shelters to provide medical care. We've done immunizations for people returning from.
We've also pre-staged, like the Democratic National Convention back in 99, 2000, or what have you, maybe in 2003 down in Los Angeles. So we were there for approximately 2 weeks, pre-staged. We stayed at one of the local college's dorms. In case anything did happen, we were right there, ready to deploy. All of our resources were there.
Okay.
So we do.
So doctors, nurses, obviously in the specialties, not just for that disaster, but I would imagine for immediate surgical, being able to evac people out, setting up those resources to be able to get people back and forth. EMTs and paramedics
Surgical,
also involved.
paramedics.
Yes.
explain the surgical thing again, because there's some misconceptions out there. People see MASH on TV, and you think a victim's coming in horribly mangled, and you're going to do the surgery. And certainly that does happen to disasters, but in disaster zones, more than anything else, it's simple, more first aid type of things. On a day-to-day basis, very few of these people who come you would really consider emergent. There are a lot of minor things. The number one most reported injury after a hurricane is insect bite. The second biggest one, cuts from chainsaws.
Yeah.
So these are not
That.
things where you're going to do this massive, that's a military model. That's, wartime and Normandy beaches and that type of stuff. So these DMAT teams set up to do a lot of minor care, which is what that population needs. There's a lot of tummy aches. It's not just trauma. There's a lot of nausea, vomiting, a lot of stress relief.
Even suturing.
So this team is coming in well after, not necessarily well after the incident, but a lot of the
Yeah, it is,
critical
well,
care-
because they're not first responders.
No,
These are not
right,
not first responders. They don't
Okay.
come lights and sirens. They're not rushing in. That's what the locals do. The locals are the first responders.
If you're that severely impacted by the event itself, you probably were either already treated or you're already deceased by the time
Yeah, exactly.
we get
Okay.
there.
But aside from just some of the, because we look at our deployment to Katrina at the Superdome and even following that West Jefferson, there are a lot of sick people because they're impacted that have chronic conditions, diabetics, other things out of medications. And we saw at Katrina a gamut from somebody having a heart attack to somebody who needed immediate surgery, internal bleeding as well. So you really do see the gamut of.
Yeah,
Right.
and they come in two waves, right? There's the first wave, which are the people who are directly impacted by the event, and then there's the second wave, people who decompensated over time because of the lack of healthcare infrastructure in that environment. So that takes a few days for that wave
To
to.
hit.
And the reason it's important is because after disaster, it's a chaotic scene. And two things bring calm to chaos: restoring government and restoring healthcare. And government gets restored. A lot of people don't see it outside of law enforcement. Law enforcement getting a handle on things, but then people want to see their health care restored, and that brings a lot of calm. If the hospitals are working again, or you can get health care sometimes outside of a hospital, then calm can come. They know you're going to return to normal and start rebuilding our houses and start getting back together again. So that's why these medical teams coming in is as much help as like I said, having law enforcement come in a riot.
So if I'm an EMT or paramedic looking for some action in a disaster, deploying with a DMAT team may not be exactly what I'm interested in.
There's
If
lots of
I want to come in,
options,
if I want to come in and help that community start over again, and like you're saying, the bug bites, the heart attacks, just establishing community health care for a community that has nothing. It sounds like that would be the place to be if that's what I
You
want to
used
do.
an interesting word that shows up a lot in EMS that, because we're talking disasters here, makes disaster response different than the EMS. You said if I'm an EMT looking for action, are you looking for action or are you looking to make a difference? If you're looking to make a
completely different things,
difference,
exactly.
go in a disaster afterwards, 2 weeks, it's like the military. It's, hours of boredom with a few minutes of excitement.
Right.
But if you want action, well, I don't know, join a circus or something.
So someone who's watching one of these events unfolds and says, I want to do something about it. Self-deploying yourself to the incident, obviously out of the
No.
question.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Remember,
How-
scene safety, that's your
We
number
heard-
one
yes.
priority.
Now, let's say I'm watching this event unfold and I say, wow, I would really love to be part of that team that goes in afterwards and makes a difference. I want to make a
You
difference.
seek out a team, you join the team, you train with the team. You may be a member of that team 3, 4, 5, 6 years before the event happens and you get sent in. And you'll be doing a lot of drills, a lot of field exercises. In the meantime, a lot of preparation.
Right, and there's a process. I mean, you can't just show up one day and go on scene with a team. You have to apply to the team, and then you have to go through the background checks, live scans and what
Yeah.
have you. So it's a whole process
And
that
it's-
could take about
I think
approximately 8
it's,
months or so.
particularly
Yeah.
for, I wouldn't say just for physicians or nurses who have not worked out in the field, but when you come into this thinking you're just gonna provide medical care,
Right.
well, you have to learn to set up a tent. You have to learn to sleep on a cot
Lift
or
and
or
carry
on
box.
the
Become
ground.
self-contained.
You
Yeah.
have water. I mean, a lot of times I'm a nurse, but I wind up setting up the water and the electrical and
So if you
some
enjoy
of
the
that other
outdoors
stuff.
and
That's
helping
right.
people.
That's
yeah.
Right, and
If you like
and
camping.
and if you want to try MREs,
On cots, or sometimes even on the ground, you're gonna
Yeah.
sleep.
Now, real quick, you mentioned Team 1. You're with
Yes,
Team 1.
Orange County,
Okay.
California.
Orange County also has USAR Task Force 5.
USARS, don't confuse USARS
Well,
and
what
the
it is-
DMAT.
What I'm saying is,
The-
you're on
Yeah.
DMAT Team 1.
That's
How many
correct.
teams are there? Is that just California, or is that
It's
national?
California, Team
That's
1 from
Cal-
California,
California.
CA1, California
CA1.
1.
Okay.
Correct.
And how many California teams do we have?
We have 9?
There's like 6
Is there
of
6?
these teams
Yeah.
that we're talking about, and there's some
Spread throughout
specialty
California.
teams.
Okay.
Smaller.
And there's
Next.
also like a DMORT, which is Disaster
Mortuary.
Mortuary Assistant Team. There's VMAT, Veterinary Assistance Team. So if you're a vet or
Or
a
you enjoy
mortician or what
Helping
have
with
you.
dead people.
Exactly.
And for people who want to respond to disasters, you got to put in a plug for Red Cross. If you want to get
Yeah, there
involved,
are a
Red Cross
lot
is
of
an
other
excellent
There's a lot
place
of
to get
Great
involved.
resource in every community.
Of faith-based groups, some of the best responders in disasters are faith-based. There are church groups that go down there.
Absolutely.
Oh, man, do they do some good work. And many times church groups have specialties. I think it's the Baptists that specialize in feeding, that come down with the tools, the equipment, the personnel to serve thousands of meals a day. Experts at it. Yeah.
Right. So if
And-
you were wanting to go and assist somebody in a disaster right now, and you don't want to wait to go through that whole process, the background check, Red Cross is a good place to start. They'll check you in, they'll put you somewhere.
Start in
To
your
give you
community.
disaster
Exactly.
training,
Learn
what's it
about it.
like,
Exactly.
how to set up a shelter,
See
how to
if
work
it's
a
something
shelter.
that you like.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
I enjoy camping, but I like to have a working shower nearby. So this probably wouldn't be the best fit
Maybe
for
not
me.
for you.
Probably not for you.
Exactly. Now, what if we can go around the table? You're all involved.
And well,
in
actually, let me
DMAT.
add one other thing
Yes.
about responding, why it's important to be on a team, because it hasn't been brought up yet. You are a doctor, a nurse, a paramedic, whatever. You're licensed in one state. When you cross a state line, you are not licensed as a doctor, nurse, or paramedic in that other state. So there has to be a mechanism. Now, the DMAT teams we're talking about is a federal team, and that, without getting into details, gives you a federal right or opportunity to practice as a doctor, nurse, paramedic, whatever, across state lines.
I call it a common sense pass.
Yeah, well, no, it's not common sense, because again, if you are not part of this federal team, background checks, applications, all the forms filled out, and you are just part of some other group that shows up, you're not a doctor, nurse, paramedic in that other state.
That's what I mean about that team having the ability.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the
Exactly.
common
Yeah,